Folge 23 des Passionate Teams Podcast. Dieser mit Marcin Floryan von Spotify. Viel Spaß! Was ist das Geheimnis passionierter Teams? Warum gibt es nur so wenige davon? Und wie können wir es schaffen, dass es mehr werden? Wenn euch diese Fragen umtreiben, dann seid ihr hier genau richtig. Wir sprechen mit nationalen und internationalen Experten zu diesem Thema und gehen dem Geheimnis passionierter Teams nach. Denn das ist unsere Passion, dafür brennen wir. Willkommen beim Passionate Teams Podcast. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Passionate Teams podcast. This time with a really interesting guest. It's Marcin Floryan, and he is one of the tribe leads at Spotify. And I have a little paragraph he just sent to me, which I try to now bring on quite good. I have to translate it from an I to he, but I will make it so. So he combines his passion for technology and for working with people to create an environment where people can apply their skills and experience working together towards a shared goal. He cares about sustainable, continuous, and frequent delivery of value and help teams take pride in the quality of the solutions they build. He sees engineering teams as complex adaptive systems and thus works by applying principles and practices from the domains of agile, lean, system thinking, and similar to allow for the desirable outcomes to emerge in the presence of sensible guiding constraint. Come on, Marcin, what a sentence.
That is, very impressive rendition, Mark.
Yeah.
I think we can stop at that, actually.
Come on. It continues like that. It sounds awesome. So he strives to be an inclusive and compassionate leader. He cares about creating an environment for psychological safety, which is an important topic on the podcast, where failures is encouraged and used as an opportunity to learn, where people can fully be themselves and where diverse opinions are encouraged and conflict seen as a healthy opportunity for learning and growth. And yeah, I think we can stop at that point. Welcome, Marcin. It's really a pleasure having you with me here. And so let's talk about teams.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. The name of your podcast sounds super intriguing, so I'm really keen to see where this conversation takes us.
Yeah, and my question I always start in the beginning is, so how would you define a passionate team?
So when I was thinking about this, I had to really get in my head through the word passionate, because I'm not sure I fully understand, what would make a team passionate, and whether even passion is something we want from a team. See, we're starting controversial here.
Sure,
but I think, I certainly have been referred to as a passionate person many, many times, but I also remember that not always being said in a positive way. It's like, this guy's really passionate, even if he doesn't know what he's doing. But I think passion is something that is a super nice ingredient to have, and it's just part of the whole setup. I see passion as being something that is around intensity, emotion, engagement, energy. So if I think about a passionate team in that context, it's a team that takes a challenge on, that works truly together at achieving or at least working towards the same goal. That's a team that has a really good time together, and that is seen as reliable, dependable group of people that constantly delivers good outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how I would also define such a passionate team. For me, it's similar. I think I chose the term passionate because sometimes it looks like that from the outside. And of course, passion is not the only thing you need. That's for sure, right? And it also won't just come from somewhere. You have to do some things, right, to create such passionate teams, right?
Yes.
And did you ever work in a passionate teams by yourself as a developer in the past, maybe some years ago?
So when I actually thought about this aspect, I would say I certainly have. I would even say that I feel I've been lucky to have worked with such teams because I realized that it's probably way less common than it should be. But I also thought that I have had a chance to work in those passionate teams, not just as software development teams, but also in leadership teams that were really passionate. I think the one of the teams where I was still working as an engineer that really is, in my mind, a really passionate team was a team I worked with in England, where I lived for quite a few years, where we were building a new backend component at a company that I worked at the time at. It was a team of about 5 people, 4 engineers, 1 business analyst. We had an agile coach as well, helping us out every now and then. And we were really close-knit. We sat in the same room. We did almost exclusively mob programming. I don't know if that's something you've talked on the podcast about. But that was really our way to drive our shared passion in the same direction. We really enjoyed each other's company. And, one of the little things we did, which I still remember fondly, was that, every now and then during lunch break, we would go and have a game of badminton. And it would usually be the 4 of us. So, a perfect setup to sweat it all out, get some energy going, and come back to the office refreshed. That has given us a lot in that team, I remember. Also because it was a great way to surface a lot of emotions. If you sit together and try to crack a really hard problem, solving these software problems is usually like that. There are different opinions, there are different ideas. Someone will ultimately drive some approach, and then others may feel, why didn't we not try the other thing? And then you go out to the court and you smash the fly, whatever. I've forgotten what it's called now.
I don't know what this is called. Yeah, the ball.
Maybe. And then you can talk about this and say like, oh, I love how we did this, but maybe we can try this other approach after lunch.
And what I like, maybe some listeners don't know what mob programming means, right? Can you maybe shortly explain what mob programming is and why it's such a powerful method for solving problems?
I can try to do it justice. So I believe if you really want to learn about mob programming, the best person to reach out to, try to listen to, is Woody Zuil, who has, I believe, coined the term and has been promoting it ever since. And the idea of mob programming is, I guess if I was to summarize it quickly, is that you sit together as a team, 1 keyboard, 1 computer, and you solve 1 problem at a time, coding together. 1 person is typing, the other people are contributing with ideas, directions, questions. And what is also super important is that you rotate the person that is actually at the keyboard. Sometimes you rotate them every 5 minutes. So it's a very intense way of working. It requires concentration. It's it's super easy to get distracted. But if you really have everyone's attention and focus, the output of such work sessions is really impressive, because you can solve problems and crack big challenges very quickly. And I believe one of the most important outcomes of working in this fashion is that you create a extremely deep level of shared understanding, so that everyone on the team ends up having very similar, if not identical, mental model of the software that you're writing together.
Yeah, true.
Which means that, everyone can reason about it in a similar way, can provide their own perspective, their own experience, but ultimately we all know what we're trying to achieve by implementing whatever classes and functions that we're implementing at the time.
Yeah. And what I also like in the end is not only the problem solving, but the other aspect which I really like is it's also some kind of team building in the end, right?
Absolutely. I think that is inevitable. And I think it comes a little bit with the intensity of the experience. It like thinking about it, about what you're doing, trying to contribute, trying to really focus, means that you maybe in a strange way don't have any energy left often to pretend something. If that makes sense, you stop trying to put a face on or a mask that sadly a lot of people feel they have to do at work. And then you become your authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
And by being able to show other people in the room your authentic self, your true personality, with all your feelings, with all your great emotions, with all your sadness, with all your problems, you become a much better connected human beings.
Yeah, that's also something I observed when we did mob programming in teams where I was coaching. And the other aspect you were talking about, which was more or less when you talk about this badminton stinks, is I think it's really important that teams not only meet professionally in their workspace, but also do something together out of workspace, right? If it's badminton, if it's doing something else together, can you relate to that too?
That is a super interesting topic because I still find a lot of people having problem with that. This notion of keeping your personal life and your professional life separate in some sort of isolated compartments, which for me is a little sad. I really like to think about your personal life and your work life as things that you want to integrate together, not things you want to separate. And that, of course, does not mean that you should think about work all your waking time, or that you should be best friends out of work with the people you're working with. But for me, the important aspect is to understand the people you work with as other human beings, as I said, with the passions, with the emotions they have, and with the problems they have. And so from that point of view, I can totally relate to the fact that you want to have a full relationship with the people you work with. And that doesn't mean that they're your best friends or they're your only friends. But I really like when you can think about the people you work with as friends.
Mm-hmm. True. So let's go maybe to your current job, which is maybe also the most interesting thing for listeners here, because you're working at a company which is maybe for most music listeners quite prominent, like Spotify. I think I don't know anybody who listens to music who don't know Spotify.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah. And so what do you do at Spotify to creating an environment where passionate teams can really thrive and do great work?
Wow, that's a big question mark.
Yeah, sure.
Because there are a lot of things that we do. And I think these things vary greatly between different parts of the organization and between different teams.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something super important to call out straight away, is that this is something that people at Spotify strongly believe in, and I think is super important and a big contribution to us being able to do what we do, which is that we truly believe and understand in context, with this idea that local context matters a lot. Therefore, that things that happen in one team that works on particular set of problems, those things will not transfer or translate to another team that has a different set of problems. That building user-facing features and building infrastructure requires different approach, different attitude, different kind of thinking. So I think that's something important to call out. That's what I believe an important part of how we do things.
Yeah, especially because lots of people looking at Spotify and starting to copy what you are doing. And what I also like in your talks, and what's also my opinion, is that you can't just copy a tool, a process, a practice from the Spotify context, and there especially from the context of a special team, which has their own context again. So even inside Spotify, there are different practices in different teams, and just copy it to your context, which may be a complete different context, and then try to apply these practices. And then some people are just wondering, oh, why it's not working here in our context? I don't understand. But it should be pretty clear that it's for me, it's all about context.
Thank you, Mark, for calling this out. Yes, absolutely. This is a message that I certainly try to share with people, because if you end up copying a set of practices or some structures, you're only taking the surface level, and you may completely miss the underlying principles or the thinking, and you may end up having something which is incoherent, incompatible, the way you try to behave with the way your company believes in behavior of their employees, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you're right that, at best, some of those practices are a forcing function to change some behaviors and make things a little better. But in the worst case, they actually work actively against what the company is capable of achieving, and therefore slows down any progress or ability to improve.
And you're also talking about from values to practices, or what is it called, the talk now? It's not values, it's principles to practices, right?
Yes.
So what are the principles you believe are really important then in this case?
That is a great question. So I think any list that I will share now is necessarily incomplete. But I let's talk about things that are important. So you've already alluded to this earlier in the beginning, the notion of psychological safety. Mm-hmm. So I have, over the last year, come to believe that that is one of the fundamental principles of building effective, well-working teams that can work well with software. Mm-hmm. I would say that is like a fundamental element, the basis, the foundation of everything we do. I believe that on top of that psychologically safe environment, you really need good leadership. And then I think we could spend an entire episode just talking about different aspects of leadership, or maybe 10 episodes. But from my point of view, the best shortcut I have in my head today around leadership, effective leadership, is one that provides servant leadership. So that as a leader, you are the custodian of the environment, that you that you are a role model, that you're an inspiration for people, and that you create a shared vision, that you challenge the environment and the ways of working that people have to make sure that they always strive to be better. We can talk about, for example, growth mindset here. That you enable others to act. That is something that I sometimes see lacking in leaders, is that the notion that they have to do a lot of things themselves. Whereas for me, leader is primarily there to enable and help other people to act. And there's a lot also about, emotions and passion, appreciation, feedback. So we have psychologically safe environment. We have good servant leadership. I believe you need a foundation of good technical practices, understanding of, what have we learned in the software industry over the last 60 years and still fail to apply. And then I believe in collaboration. And I think that's a super important principle, that we work together, that we're in this together as a team, not as a bunch of individuals that each wants to tackle their own challenges.
Which is also something you see a lot, right?
Yes.
That people are specializing more and more, and then you have a group of people where everybody's working on his or her topic, right? Instead of really working together, because they can't really work together again as a team, because if everybody has their specialty and is not really, the term T-shaped people, right? And then you have just a bunch of 5 people, for example, working on some project, and everybody has their own topic. And if nobody else can help you on a topic, then you're not really a team. Then you're just a group of people.
Absolutely. I have a great example from 2 days ago. I was at a car workshop, and there was a small problem with my car. So I had to drop it off and get it fixed. And then, I walk into the workshop, and it turns out there's a queue for the guy who can register my car and the problem. Okay, so I wait in the queue. I talk to him 2 minutes. He says, fine, we're going to take care of it. And I say, oh, by the way, I've forgotten. I also wanted to order this one part that I was missing. Can I do this? I was like, no. Here's another friend of mine, queue in line to him. Okay, so then I queue, talk to the other person who clicks on the computer in the same system probably and goes, okay, your part is now ordered. And then and I go, queue back to the first person I met, and I said, oh, you told me that my assistance program allows me to rent a car. Can we fix that as well while you're fixing my car? Said, oh, yeah, but that's the third desk. So then I go to the third desk, and there's no one there, but I can call to a line. Someone picks up the call and say, oh, I will, there's a person who deals with this. I will call them, and they will come in 5 minutes. So I've interacted with 6 people now and waited for half an hour just to get one thing done.
Yeah.
Of course, from the company's perspective, I guess, they're all specialists dealing as effectively as possible with their own little domain. But actually, my experience has been of a lot of waiting, a lot of handovers, a lot of queues. So I think that's exactly what happens in software teams. But the customer's experience is more the experience of how quickly we can build software.
Yeah, and that's I think that all comes from how people are organizing production systems, where it may completely make sense that you have a guy who is working on station A doing a special task, and there's another guy on station B doing the next task in line, and then you can focus on what you're doing. But to transform this way of working to creative work, or to maybe something like where you have customer interaction, doesn't make any sense from my point of view.
I absolutely agree. It not only doesn't make any sense, but also if you look at some of the modern manufacturing operations, they also don't necessarily work like this.
Yeah, no.
So that's even more fascinating. Again, we're copying something which is already outdated, something that on the surface makes sense, but is not connected with the principles and the nature of work that we have to deal with.
True. So what else? We have psychological safety, we have servant leadership, we have good technical practices, we have collaboration. Do you have something else you think it's important?
Yes, absolutely. I believe it is super important to create and use feedback loops. And those feedback loops come in lots of shapes and sizes. I think the obvious one, which lots of companies talk about, is the interpersonal feedback, so that we give and receive feedback among each other to help each other grow and understand how we work better together. But I also believe there's a lot around the feedback on our product. So a good practical implementation of that is running experiments, building features, putting them out in front of a small subset of users and learning how they interact with our new feature. Is it helpful? Is it useful? Is it driving the right behaviors? There's also a lot around the feedback on the processes that we have. Do we have some data that can show us if our processes are improving or not? Do we have, lead time, cycle time? Do we know how big the queues are in different parts of our software development process? Mm-hmm. All these things form important signals, important feedback signals.
Mm-hmm. And so giving and receiving feedback is also something I would call it a skill, which not everybody is good at, right? So do you do something special at Spotify to show people how to give and receive feedback in a valuable way? Und an dieser Stelle endet der erste Teil dieser Folge. Wenn ihr wissen wollt, wie es weitergeht, abonniert meinen Podcast oder schaut einfach morgen drauf, denn morgen erscheint der zweite Teil vom Interview mit Marcin Floryan. Und ich glaube, es ist wert, auch den zweiten Teil reinzuhören, weil da kommen noch viele weitere interessante, spannende Sachen. Ihr würdet mir auch einen Riesengefallen tun, wenn ihr meinen Podcast bewertet, gern auch Kommentare reinschreibt. Schreibt mir auch gerne rein, was ihr hören möchtet, welche Gäste ihr gerne im Podcast haben wollt. Und dann tue ich mein Bestes, um diese Gäste hier mit reinzuholen. Ansonsten, wir hören uns morgen mit dem zweiten Teil. Einen wunderschönen Tag wünsche ich noch.